Hi stranger, and welcome back to Gentle Flow Stories. This evening, we'll slow the day down with one of those quiet rituals that often pass unnoticed. We'll carry freshly washed laundry out to the balcony, hang each piece in the warm summer air, and watch the light slowly change as the day comes to an end. By the time the last towel is resting on the clothesline, the neighborhood will have settled into evening, and perhaps we'll feel a little more settled too. If you'd like to return for more peaceful evenings like this, you can subscribe whenever it feels right. Now let's begin. the center of your attention. Instead, your focus rested on the cool touch of linen against your fingertips, the pleasant resistance of each clothespin, the warmth of the balcony beneath your bare feet, and the changing light that quietly transformed everything around you. Without noticing exactly when it happened, your breathing had become slower. By the time you fastened the final clothespin, the clothesline had been completely transformed. Where there had been only empty space a few minutes before, there was now a gentle row of freshly washed linen, moving softly in the evening air. You stepped back, resting one hand lightly against the balcony railing. The basket at your feet was empty now. The work itself had never been difficult, and yet, standing there beneath the slowly fading sky, it felt as though something more than the laundry had been gently put back into place. with soft shadows now, and only a small lamp in the living room cast a warm circle of light across the wooden floor. You left the balcony door slightly open, just enough for the cool air to continue drifting inside, just enough for the song of the crickets to follow you through the apartment. The bedroom felt wonderfully inviting after the warmth of the day. Fresh cotton sheets waited beneath the open window, carrying the faint scent of sunlight from earlier that afternoon. You slipped beneath the blanket and settled comfortably onto the mattress, noticing how easily your body seemed to sink into its familiar place. Outside, the hanging laundry continued its slow dance beneath the stars. Inside, the room had become a place where nothing more was expected of you. You allowed your head to rest a little deeper into the pillow, feeling its gentle support beneath your neck. The muscles across your forehead softened almost without asking. Your jaw no longer held the quiet tension that often followed a busy day, and your shoulders seemed perfectly content to let the mattress carry their weight. Your hands rested loosely beneath the blanket, warm and still, while your legs gradually became heavier, as though every step you had taken throughout the day had finally come to rest. The air entering through the open balcony door felt cool against your cheeks. Each slow breath arrived effortlessly. Each gentle exhale seemed to leave behind a little more of the day. Outside, the crickets continued their steady song. The herbs rested quietly on their shelves. The clean linen moved softly beneath the sky now filled with stars. Tomorrow morning, the towels would smell of fresh air. The pillowcases would be cool and crisp. The summer blanket would find its place once again on the sofa. Everything would be waiting. There was nothing left to remember tonight, nothing left to finish, only the quiet certainty that your home had settled into the evening, and that you could settle with it. As the sounds outside became softer and your breathing found its own gentle rhythm, sleep arrived with the same patience as the summer dusk itself, never hurried, never demanding, simply surrounding you little by slowly